Welcome to By Subject. Our guest today is Chad Jardine, founder and CEO of CMO Zen. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, delighted to be here. Thanks, Pete.
So, tell us a little bit about you. You know, we were chatting a little bit beforehand. You grew up here in Utah County, but tell us a little bit about growing up and what got you into marketing in the first place.
Yeah, thanks. So, that's right. I was born in Seattle. I was a transplant to Utah as a young boy. Most of my growing up here, went to Orem High School, right? Go Tigers. And really took my first marketing job. My first marketing job was, my dad was a real estate developer.
Oh.
And so I started to kind of cut my teeth in sales and marketing working for him. And then my first real job that wasn't for a family member was, I was the marketing director over the retail Provo Craft stores. And so this is, Provo Craft became Cricut,
Right.
because of the popularity of their paper cutter. And my team was actually the team that launched that. We did the trial run of the Cricut in the Roberts stores before they took it out to Michael's and Walmart and Joann's and whatnot.
So did you go to college for marketing and you were totally in love with marketing and you decided I'm going to do this for college, or did you just go the work route?
Yeah, no. So I actually went to college for fine art. I went to BYU. I went with the intention of being a painter.
Really?
And
do you still paint for fun now?
I find ways to scratch my creative itch. So I sometimes draw and sketch. I do a lot of graphic stuff, and I do a lot of creative problem solving for my work. But I don't paint in oils anymore. And I ultimately graduated in ceramics. I rarely throw on a wheel these days either. But
do you have one in the garage?
That's a great question. No, I don't.
Oh.
But there's a couple of places around where you can go.
Really?
And you can just get wheel time, and it's great. There's love ceramics, and all of that sort of time that I spent there informs what I do now and what I have done over the past 20 plus years.
So what years are we talking about? I remember those Provo Craft days. My family business was selling stuff to them, and we were selling some of those products too. So tell me a little bit about, this must have been, late 90s, 97, 98, 99, somewhere in that range.
Yeah. So this was essentially 2004.
Oh, okay.
To about 2007.
Okay.
So it was a little bit of the tail wagging the dog there. So they started as a chain of stores, and it actually was called Provo Craft before it was Roberts. Then they became both a manufacturer and a retailer.
Yeah.
And Roberts was the retail side. And when I was there, they had 11 stores.
Okay.
These are all gone now.
Right.
But they had 11 stores in Utah and Idaho, and so it was really my baptism into retail.
Yeah.
Understanding what retail marketing was all about. We had a budget of about $1 million, and we did a lot of newspaper ads and stuff that feels kind of old school to what we're doing now. But it was a great experience for me. I got to work with great people. The opportunity to do a big, this was their push into personal consumer electronics.
Yeah.
To be able to play a part in that and just be in the orbit. I just learned a ton. And really, so my college days, you graduate in computer science and recruiting letters show up in your mailbox.
Yeah.
Strangely, that doesn't happen in fine arts.
No one's calling for a new ceramicist.
It's
Novell in the early 90s, early 2000s.
Shocking, I know.
Yeah.
Right? And so I actually was doing marketing and sales for my dad's real estate company to pay my way through college.
Right.
And so that spun into my career, and really I kind of brought art with me into my career as opposed to bringing my career into the arts.
What kind of stuff was your dad building during that time? He's a developer?
Yeah, so he had a multifamily condo development.
Okay.
And so I went and got a real estate license, and really what that kind of triggered for me was a love of understanding the people on the other side of an exchange.
Right.
So we're all about, whether you're in marketing or sales, it's all about revenue at the end of the day.
Sure.
There's a human being somewhere that, and we're matchmakers, right? We have products that solve problems, and we're trying to matchmake those with the consumers who have those problems.
Right.
And so that really is where I first started my journey in going deep about what was it that people wanted?
Yeah.
What were they responding to? And how could I best meet their needs as a marketer? it was a good start.
And so you jumped to Provo Craft, Roberts, Cricket, whatever we want to call that, early years. And I remember those first couple of years of like, the punch outs was essentially like
That's right. They had these Sizzix things. They had and that was a huge product for them. Like they sold bajillions of those.
I remember them and thinking, who's buying these? And then they'd sell an enormous amount.
And this was in the heyday of like the scrapbooking trend, right?
Correct. Yep.
Which essentially was a paper crafting graphic design for people who wanted to tell the story of their family.
Right.
And it was a great time. And that has ebbed a little bit or transformed. But it was really interesting to be there in the middle of that huge trend.
And so what was your role there at Provo Craft? What were you hired on to? It sounds like you were there for about 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. So I was hired to essentially run the marketing for the retail side. They had another marketing director for the wholesale manufacturing side, which was the side of the business that was growing.
Right.
To put that in perspective, the retail side was doing a little under $30 million in revenue across all 11 stores.
Okay.
At the end of 2004, going into 2005, they Sorensen Capital made an investment in them because they had just closed their first year at about $100 million in sales.
Okay.
And I wasn't in the heart of that transaction, but that actually watching how that happened, and in that process, I got a new boss and learned a lot of lessons about transition and what happens as companies raise money.
Yeah.
That kind of spun into some other things for me, which was a great experience.
Yeah. And so you bring in money, you get a new boss. What were those early years like? What did you love about marketing in the middle of the 2000s, kind of right before that crash there? What was working then? What are some of those through lines to what you're seeing now, 20 years later?
Yeah. Well, so it was really helpful to see, okay, what of the work that I was doing was attached to kind of core marketing principles.
Yeah.
And what of it was attached to the kind of tribal knowledge of retail. And since then, as I've gone through other industries, that's been really helpful because there are some things that stay the same. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. It's because there's a human being on the other side.
Right.
But other things change all the time.
Yeah.
And so that was an opportunity for me to get a taste of what retail was like. I mean, we were going to these stores that had they had a relatively small footprint, 5,000 or 6,000 square feet, 20 or 30,000 SKUs. Most of those SKUs turned maybe once a year. And then there was a handful of kind of 80-20 that turned enough to keep the store going.
Right.
And then also the business question about should we even keep these stores going? Is the operation of this retail arm a drag or a boost to the manufacturing arm, which was growing?
Yeah.
And it was like the Cricket kind of took over, right?
Right. That was the big moment for that company was, punching out holes out of paper.
We're not just a paper manufacturer anymore.
Right.
Like now you've got this plotter with a little knife on it that can cut out anything you want.
Right. Okay, so you jump from Provo Craft, and where'd you end up next?
Workfront. So
Workfront. Okay.
Workfront was called AdTask in those days. And this was in 2007. So January of 2007, I moved over to Workfront. Workfront was...
They were small then.
Yeah, they had just finished... At 2006, they closed out with about $2.5 million in revenue. Okay. So not quite the 1 point whatever billion that they sold to Amazon or to Adobe for a couple years ago. It was early for them, and I got another chance to watch them because in 2007, we went from $2.5 million to at the end of 2007 we were close to $8 million in revenue. So it was a high growth period for us. And in the middle of 2007 is when they first took investment from OpenView. Right. So it was their first sort of institutional round of investment, and watching how that dynamic at play, it was a really great time to learn. Yeah, both the marketing that we were doing and how that evolved, understanding the mechanisms for B2B SaaS. I mean, SaaS was pretty early then. Yeah, I think Salesforce.com was around 40 million in revenue, about around that time.
Sounds about right. Yeah,
and they were breaking trail with their no software pitches, which is like, no, we're not. We're a subscription. We're not. Right. We're not a box full of CDs. Mm-hmm. And understanding how that was going to transform things. It was great to be early in that. And all the old dogs like, oh, we did SaaS before it was SaaS. It's like well, yeah, but now we call it SaaS.
Yeah.
And people know what it is when we talk about it. And it was a great opportunity and great people. There were great people in the early days of that company.
So you go from, again, being selling to consumers to then selling to B2B. What was that transition like for you? Was that hard? Was it something that you came naturally to you? Did you like that transition from B2C to B2B?
Yeah. So I did like it. I love both B2B and B2C.
Sure.
And have been blessed to be able to do a little bit of both. But some things that in B2B, right? B2B is a more considered purchase. People generally take a little longer, sales cycles a little longer, more technical, a little less emotional.
Yeah.
Which really, to me, represents the challenge of trying to find the emotional connection in the middle of what's a technical sale.
Yeah.
Oftentimes the buyers are not trying to satisfy their own needs or their own problems, but they're trying to not get fired.
Yeah, right.
And so the psychology changes a little bit.
Yeah.
And understanding that expanded my understanding of people buy for a lot of different reasons, and the better that I could understand that, the better I would do as a marketer.
Yeah. So, who are some of those early mentors that really led you to grow into the marketer that you are now from those eras? Who was leading you and who was helping pull you along in your learnings there?
Yeah, so a couple of shout outs. Sam Robinson was my new boss at Provo Craft after Sorensen took over.
Yeah. Learned
a lot from Sam about management in general, but also about, because he was a retail guy.
Yeah.
It came from Mervyn's and Target and whatnot, and All a Dollar, greenbacks.
Mervyn's lives in my head rent free for that open commercial for years.
Yeah.
Still all the time. You bring it up and in my head I'm like, open. The best commercial ever. Unbelievable.
We sometimes don't realize just the abuse that we're inflicting on people when we come up with these slogans.
That's that ad still, lives rent free in my mind all for 30 years now, 40 years maybe. I don't know, too long.
Yeah, and then I learned a lot from watching AdTask, Workfront grow. Scott Johnson was the intensity that he approached solving the problems of the business was really great. And along the way, I was doing an MBA at the University of Utah.
Yeah.
And my instructors up there, right? Eric Schultz and Abby Griffin.
Right.
They had a big influence on me to take they allowed me to take what was an academic view of marketing and be able to apply it immediately.
Right.
And so that helped cement some of those early lessons in my head. I think sometimes today too, it's great to be able to go to the academic side of marketing, and talk about the practical that we're in, every day. And then that was a time too where I did a lot of reading.
Yeah.
I read a lot and tried to apply what I was doing. So I was reading what are now old authors, Tim Sanders and Seth Godin, and
right.
That was really great.
So one of the things that it's clear from, following you online and seeing, talking to you earlier today and knowing that you some of the teaching that you do up at the U, you definitely have more of a business leaning mindset to marketing. You're often talking about pricing strategy. You're often talking about the way to run a business. You're talking about investment and things related to financial incentives. When did that come into play for you as a marketer? When did you lean into understanding the business side of it? Was it from your dad and that earlier, or did it come later?
That's a great insight. So probably a bunch of that is from my dad.
Okay.
And I think I also have a deep-seated belief that marketing is closer to the running of the business than just about any other department.
Okay.
And my rationale for that is you don't have to understand all of the parts of how the business works to run a great dev team or to run a great CS team.
Okay.
But great marketers are, in my opinion, great in part because they're great business people. They understand what matters to the business and what matters to the customer. And that's what makes them strong as marketers. So if they're out of touch with that, then it's hard as a marketer to really gain traction, because who's your boss, right?
Right.
you report into the CEO or into the structure that reports to the CEO. And and marketing is one of the squishiest disciplines.
Yeah.
And I think that's in large part because marketing is a process of discovering things that are not yet known.
Yeah.
You don't come into the process knowing everything that's going to work. As much as people view marketers as, like a paintbrush and a beret, we're much more scientists with beakers and,
We'd like to think we're more. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's translating both is really, I think, translating both to the business case is really, I think, where we succeed.
Yeah.
I had an experience too when I was at Workfront. Part of that transition, right, as they took investments, their dev teams moved to Scrum.
Okay.
And in order to be we were a software company, right? Our product was the output of the dev team. And so we did, as a marketing team, we also transitioned to Scrum. We ran all our projects in Scrum. We just adopted a Scrum as a project management process. And it's a little different because our marketing team didn't have interchangeable roles.
Right.
So it wasn't like, okay, any of these, 5 devs on the squad could take this thing in the daily Scrum and go work on it. But we kind of adapted to that, and that helped us internally. It helped make it to where internally people understood what kind of projects we were working on and what their outputs were going to be. So I think all of those kind of compounded for me in having a business perspective and where marketing fits.
I would say that out of, most of the people that I interact with on the internet in the marketing role, I see you leaning into that business first mindset more than most. And do you think that that's one of the reasons why you've been able to become so successful in your role as a marketer, is you have thought carefully about that business? About the not just revenue, we bring, let me frame it even in a better way. We bring people in, they talk about, being friendly with their sales counterparts. We talk about getting in front and understanding their, understanding what the senior leadership wants or the CEO wants, or they talk about getting and understanding the buyer and what they're thinking about. I think from what I'm hearing from you is something different than any of those components. You're actually thinking more about the business as a business and how to make the business better as a marketer than just those 3 components. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think so. And so when it comes down to what's helped me to be successful or not, I think in my full-time roles, leading up to where I am now, I think it's always, I've always spent my career in, microcap companies.
Right.
And some of them very early.
Yeah.
But none of them, haven't worked in a company over, say, a couple $100 million in sales. That's a territory that my career hasn't gone through.
Right.
And so the smaller the company is, the more like the business drives everything. And so being able to be, a good sort of ally and confidant to the CEO or my my other colleagues in the senior team, I think strengthens the ability to create value.
Right.
In my role now, CMOZen we're a fractional CMO firm, and so our clients are all they're all youngish.
Right.
It's a sort of pre-Series B type companies, and so who am I selling to? Always the CEO or the founder.
Right.
And so being able to understand and come up to speed quickly on this is the business case. This is how things matter for us as a business. I think does help and helps translate marketing into something that like if they were deep in marketing, they wouldn't be looking for the kind of extra value add that we would provide.
Right.
And so as they look for that, being able to translate it and make it accessible to them, 'cause marketing sometimes feels like such a black box.
Yeah. Right.
And so being able to unpack that box a little bit for them, I think is a strength for us.
And understand the business case around all of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to dive into CMOZen. So tell me why now? You launched, what, a year ago, 18 months
2 years
ago,
ago, yeah.
2 years ago. Why now as launching an outsourced fractional CMO company? Like what was right about the industry now that allows for you to enter the market?
Yeah. So a couple of things. Like in the last year, there's been a huge surge of sort of fractional roles.
Sure.
I think that's driven in large part because there's been a lot of layoffs.
Right.
And as people are trying to, it's hard scrabble out there trying to make a living, and fractional is becoming a more well-known approach.
Yeah.
So like, hey, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and do that. I kind of started a little bit before that. I was transitioning out of a role, and I was like, I had thought it might be fun.
Yeah.
To do take on. It is both fun and maddening. Okay. Right. As you well know, right?
Yeah. Yep.
It is. The variety is amazing. Yeah. Being able to, I feel like that my learning curve is way steeper.
Yeah.
Like in a full-time role, you kind of knock down the challenges right in front of you and move on to the next one.
Yeah.
But now, like I knock it down and then knock it down again, and you start to get really efficient and really good at the problems that early stage companies are facing. So that's been fun. I have a friend who says that learning is happiness. I think that's true.
Yeah.
Like when your learning curve is steep, it's like, yeah, it's crazy, but also this is great.
Right.
And in terms of like problems in the market, so as I was thinking about launching CMOZen, I talked to people. I tried to get smart at it before I, lost my shirt.
Yeah.
And so I called people that were, some of them were doing other types of fractional work, and I was like, hey guys, talk me off the ledge here. Let me take you to lunch. Tell me why this is a terrible idea.
Right.
And they were really disasters at that. They came, you should do this. This is amazing.
People are the worst.
And so a combination of false confidence and some early traction was, and kind of, I was off to the races. But I am a believer in it though. Like I think that there are opportunities where it's just about proportionality.
Right.
So when you're young and you're growing, every dollar is precious, and so it's like you can't afford to go hire a big CMO who has a big company experience. It's an expensive full-time hire.
Right.
And also it's usually the wrong hire. Like I've been that wrong hire where somebody brings me in because what they want is a lot of marketing juice.
Yeah.
And so why is that an expensive hire? Because what that job is leveraging the output of teams.
Yeah.
Right. Being able to get teams to perform at their best.
Right.
Also managing, understanding the business case, I think, is part of it, but managing more complex budgets.
Yeah.
All of the stuff that you have to do, internal communication.
Yep.
All of that stuff. So a little company goes out and they're like, okay, we're going to stretch and we're going to get this big CMO in here.
Yeah.
And that CMO shows up and it's like, all right, where's the team? It's like, oh no, you're the team.
Yeah. Right. And
it's like, okay, that's a mistake. And so being able to get a hold of all of the positive value adds from that role at a price that's more affordable, more proportionate to where you are in your growth.
Yeah.
I think that's something that's going to be sort of a secret to the success of young companies over the next decade.
And so making it allows for a company to make a smarter financial decision to hire someone who has the expertise, who can then actually afford to pay a team to do the work.
That's right. It reduces the risk.
Right.
Right. Because you think about like those big senior hires, they take a long time.
Yep.
They're expensive, right? Not just in terms of salary, but there's benefits. Sometimes there's an equity component to the comp. So they take a long time to hire. If you make a mistake, which happens a lot,
right?
They're really difficult. They're time consuming and expensive to fire.
Right.
I like to tell people, it's like, look, you could actually have hired and fired 3 fractionals before you make 1 full-time hire.
Yeah.
And so that there's a lot of risk reduction in that, in the model. And that risk is real, right? I mean, you make a bad senior marketing hire as a 1 or 2 year old startup, and you just gave up a year of your growth.
Right.
Because then you got to start the process again. Find a good one for the one that you. And it's usually not that they are good or bad marketers. It's just about alignment and fit.
Right.
Sometimes they're being asked to do things that are not right for them, and if the CEO, the founder, they're looking for marketing help because it's not in their bag of tricks.
Right.
And so sometimes it can be really hard. Like a big part of what we do now is hire our replacements.
Yeah.
Right. We get going, get things up and running, and it's like, okay, I think we're ready for full time. Great. Well, let us help you, set that person up for success, the new CMO.
Right.
And working our way out of a job in that way is a success for us.
Tell me who, in your, you understand you've gone out and you've understood the buyers of CMO Zen. So tell me who is the right type of company to hire CMO Zen now?
Yeah. So I'm focused more on stage than anything else.
Okay.
Right now, I don't have anybody on my team that is really strong on e-commerce or DTC.
Right.
So if somebody comes in and that's their
Okay.
go-to-market motion, it's like, okay, I'm going to refer you to somebody else who's great at that.
Yeah.
And so in the stage, what we're looking at is usually there's kind of a handful of maybe describing as sort of buckets of things that are missing.
Yeah.
That the company needs to kind of get to the next plateau in terms of its revenue.
Okay.
It may be the very earliest go-to-market things, right? It's like, hey, we actually don't. Our customer's not validated. Our messaging may have problems, or we don't have it dialed in. We need a systematic way to go through that. Those are projects that we often do. Product, it could be pricing.
Yeah.
We think that our pricing is holding us back. And then after that, there's this place where it's like, okay, we're looking around and all of our competitors seem like they're doing every channel under the sun, and they're doing it like 100 miles an hour, and we're lost.
Right.
And so being able to come and say, well, here's a process. We're going to take all of that stuff that's like, should we be on TikTok? Well, let's see if we can. How do we figure that out?
Right.
Should we going to events? Should we all of the channels? What should we be leaning into some sort of AI product in our marketing? And so being able to come to those companies and say, here's a systematic way of nailing down your product, understanding what the budget's going to be beforehand, nailing down the channels that are available to you and prioritizing them. It is amazing how clear things get if you simply have a rank ordered list of channels that you factored in cost, preference, where's the customer, and that you can start testing through those. It's amazing how easy it is to develop a marketing plan and a marketing budget if you can get to that point.
What's working for you on sales for CMO Zen? What's working marketing wise for you as a small outsourced agency?
Yeah, great question. And I also think that this is probably the hardest marketing challenge I've ever run into. Right?
I mean, we're marketing ourselves as an agency all the time, and I was like, I have no idea how to sell this. Yeah,
and I think part of that is because our customer is getting bombarded.
Totally.
Right. And so being able to both connect with them, and then also help them in a legitimate way, show why we might be a better choice than what they have in front, because obviously self-serving, right? So we're going to be biased, and so we work really hard to try to tell people no if we're a bad fit.
Right.
I think that's a really important thing when you're an independent group. But so where do we find them? Same places that a lot of people find them, right?
Yeah.
We do a lot of networking and word of mouth and referrals.
Yeah.
A lot of events, a lot of places. We do a lot of education.
Yeah.
I think education is a way to kind of let people sample.
Right.
It's like, oh, these guys. It looks like these guys know what they're talking about this, and I like how they're approaching it. Yeah, that's probably how it's going to be for other things.
Yeah.
And shoot, I had a thought there that I lost. It must have been a lie.
There's this comedian who he had this whole joke about if someone said to him, it must not have been important, that his response was always, oh yeah, I'm radioactive. You have some unbelievable talent helping you at CMO Zen. You founded it with Jordan Harris and Mark, and you've got Jill and Dave there.
Yeah.
Tell me about how important that mix of like finding the right person for the right company in that fractional space.
So it is. I mean, the team is kind of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Right. And for a couple of reasons. One is that for us, we're like, hey, our vision of this is maybe not to be the biggest thing in the world,
Sure.
but to have an appropriate scale that makes to where we get all the advantages of that scale. So that everybody who's not just the partners, but everybody who's working in CMO Zen gets economies of scale that are hard as a solopreneur.
Right.
But you still have the freedom and flexibility that is why you're not, taking a full-time job.
Yeah.
And so all of that team has helped us as we've tried to find our way.
Yeah.
And we're not done.
Sure.
But as we've tried to find our way, everybody has been really great in terms of having the flexibility to try things, to figure things out, be on board with kind of the vision of what CMOZen is trying to be, which is essentially we're trying to encapsulate what is the absolute best way as a young startup to grow your marketing operation.
Yeah.
And then also to blend a balance of talents and skills. So, for example, I think it's really common among marketers to lean more to either the creative side or the analytic side, kind of a right brain, left brain.
Totally.
But companies need both.
Right.
So that becomes a really difficult thing to find in a single marketer.
Right.
And how do you balance that? But I think for us too, to have marketers who are really strong in revenue operations, marketing ops, and also really strong on the creative side, has helped us kind of figure out the right balance. Because clients come in, sometimes they need. It's like, hey, I really have a rev ops problem. Yeah, and it's like, okay, well, we can lean into that, or hey, we don't really know who we are.
Right.
And it becomes a branding problem.
Bringing Jill there.
Yeah.
How unfair is it how good looking David Baker is? It's a little unfair, right?
I mean, I'm not going to lie. There's a little bit of shaming.
Yeah.
Just he shows up in the room and it's a little bit,
It's ridiculous. I hate that guy.
He's a great guy.
One of my best friends from high school. I love him so much.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But long time friend.
He was one, and a great marketer.
Unbelievable marketer. Personal tragedy all over the place, but one of the happiest, most unbelievable people I've ever been around. Him and his family are the greatest.
100%.
And I've been so happy seeing him land with you and seeing the success that he's been able to pull there too. So tell me, I would love to know from your opinion where you feel like marketing's headed over the next 5 to 10 years. What do you see? You are in the middle, your fingers are in a lot of different companies. You're at the forefront of what this world is like. What do you see as the next sort of round of marketing? What do we need to think about in this new world?
Yeah, great question. So I think about this a lot. I'll try to distill that down into something that's coherent. I do think that the fractional model is going to, and I'm going to be a little bit heretical. Like you wouldn't probably hear this from other fractional folks, but the fractional CMO role is not the same job as the CMO job.
Right. Yeah.
And so we call it fractional CMO, and really what you have is companies that think they need a CMO or some type of marketing lead, and they have a budget that is fractional.
Right.
Right. So it's not that a fractional CMO is really what they need. They need a CMO, and they can only pay fractional. Cool. So they need to find some way of dovetailing those. And I think in that environment, the things that kind of unlock efficiency for early stage companies, especially in the building blocks, like just the core elements of their marketing strategy, I think become really important. I think as a fractional CMO, your processes and systems are every bit as important as your expertise and experience.
Yeah.
Which is like when you first start, you're a little bit of a disadvantage, right? Like you're building these things as fast as you can go.
Right.
But you encapsulate so much learning into these processes that you can knock out something, once you have that baked, you can knock out in a fraction of the time what used to take you, much longer. I think that in that same vein, I think as we see AI go from being more, AI is so great.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's kind of two camps about AI in marketing, like the fear mongers and the holy crap, look what we can do.
Yeah.
I tend to be a little bit in the second camp because I see the problem as how do we deliver, big company, big team, big budget outcomes for companies that don't have any of that.
Right.
And I think AI has the potential to unlock some of that.
Sure.
And certainly, like, marketing is like every other discipline in the fact that there are tasks that are not the highest and best use of our brains, not the most creative work. And I view that from the perspective of that like I'm a big believer that creativity is productivity.
Yeah. Like
that spark of inspiration that solves a problem you've been chewing on for 2 weeks. That moment is worth many thousands of dollars per hour.
Right.
When the other moments when you're, pounding your head on the sidewalk trying to figure it out were not worth as much.
Yeah.
And I think AI has the potential to free us up to spend more time on the really innovative and creative things, because it will commoditize the mundane efforts.
Yeah.
I think AI is a great co-pilot, a great ride along. Take some of the heavy lifting and drudgery off of us, and exactly what that will look like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I have a theory. I believe that we'll start to see, as we've seen kind of income inequality since really kind of triggered in the 1980s and has spread. So the lowest rung is still way higher in income than it was before, but the highest rung is way, way higher than that.
Yeah.
And that creates this kind of disparity among people. I think that we will see something similar in tech. There will become a technological inequality.
Yeah.
So people that have access to tools, access to build things from AI, like I think some of the core resources to do things in AI will start to be dominated by players at the top. And I think that's going to create an interesting dynamic for us.
One of the things that I've sort of, I'd love to get your feedback on sort of this idea on the AI front. But, if I take two things that I loved this year or last year, the Barbie movie and hating on Marvel movies. Those are two things I loved this past year. So like the Barbie movie was all real. They built those sets. It was, you filmed a real thing, and then you go watch one of those superhero movies and it's all fake, right? And I kind of see this idea of like where marketing going in those two directions. You've got the company that's going to spend the money to get the real person to film them do the actual thing, then put that out in an ad. And then you've got the other people that are like, I'm going to spend 100 times less and I'm going to do it on computer with AI and not use a real person, and it's going to look fake and not be interesting. Yeah. And and so that's, do you see that kind of disparity too? Like the people who can afford to do the real thing are going to be more successful than those who can only afford the AI component?
I don't think, I think the success or failure of those are types of execution.
Sure.
So for me, the success or failure is more about the underlying idea. I think like an analog for AI would be like the advent of photography.
Sure. Okay.
So portrait painters are like, oh crap,
yeah,
we're gonna be out of business.
Right.
Is fine art painting, gone away? No, but there's a democratization of photography, especially right now, right? Like everybody's got, a film studio in their pocket.
Everybody's got a spouse that loves photography.
Yeah. Well, and think about this, right? Like we're doing a podcast. It's essentially a radio show.
Yep.
We're sitting here in the middle of 3 Blackmagic cameras, which are cheaper than any camera you could have done this.
Right.
Right. I mean, this is like, there's a certain accessibility that comes, and I think that's positive.
Yeah.
So now if I'm a young kid and I have an idea, I can make it.
Sure.
I could make a movie.
Yeah.
Right. Or I can make a podcast. I can make a series of videos. There's a lot, the tools are less of an inhibitor to people's creativity and innovation.
Okay.
I think that's positive.
Yeah.
But I think the thing is like when I went to BYU to art school, like there's these kind of strata. Like there's some of these professors are like, yeah, I grind my own pigments, mix my own paints,
right,
stuff them into the tubes. It's like, there's something kind of authentic and real and cool about that.
Right.
At the same time, like you're doing like a painting a year.
Right.
So I think there's a type of value that's created in that that it's awesome, and I think there will just be this balance, right? People still paint portraits,
sure,
even though you could take a photograph.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's how that will shake.
So
out.
You kind of see this idea of the future is there will be an opening up of people's ability to be more creative because the things that inhibited it before are less.
Yeah, there's less speed bumps from the brain to whatever you want to put out there.
Okay, interesting. So you think we're going to have a more creative future?
Well, I don't think I actually said that. I think there's more possibilities.
Okay.
But I also think like if you look at what's happening with AI right now, essentially, like, if you look at AI as like a crowd of interns.
Yeah.
No experts.
Sure.
And the output is the amalgamation of the crowd.
Right.
Sometimes that's awesome.
Yeah.
Like there are things that I'm not a programmer.
Right.
So if I have a crowd of mediocre programmers, they can run circles around me in writing code.
Sure.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But also the output is it's built into the program that the output is mediocre.
Right.
It's a crowd of average is what, and you may find that there's a place for virtuosity in AI that's still coming.
Right.
But we don't have it right now.
No.
You don't. I mean, AI is not going to write a Pulitzer-winning anything. You know,
not
it's not going to build a Clio-winning ad.
Yeah.
Because it can't. It's dragged down. Like, it's dragged down by the average.
Right. Interesting. Okay. We don't have much more time, but I do want to touch base. I know that you do some adjunct professorship. So tell me a little bit about where you're doing that, what you're doing as far as education.
Yeah. So for the past 15 years, I've taught some courses in venture capital as an adjunct at the University of Utah.
Okay. In the business school?
It's in the business school. It's in the finance department.
Okay.
So usually my students are, and it's a graduate level course. So my students are usually either MBA students or master finance students. Okay. And that's been a huge blessing in my life to just be able to interact with the students.
Okay.
The students are great, and the entrepreneurship is a lot less closed now than it was 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of lessons that everybody's learning them, as they go for the first time themselves. Yeah. And that's a painful way to learn.
Right.
So I like the opportunity to try to give students some shortcuts where they can kind of, it's like, look, yeah, this is what this universe looks like. Right. And they don't come out of there, knowing everything. Yeah. They just come out having been exposed to some things that I think make them better prepared as they go and do it for themselves. Yeah,
so maybe let's finish up with a couple of things. Give me some recommendations that you would have. What are some learnings that people should have both on that VC front, what your professorship is, and then also, how should people think about, becoming better marketers? What are some tips and things that that you can help people with there?
Yeah, okay. So I mean, no surprise for me. Like if I'm a founder and I'm looking to raise money, that's a marketing problem.
Yeah.
Right. It's a marketing and sales problem.
Exactly.
So and so it's the same way that you would approach that with marketing for a company. It's about understanding the audience. Yeah. And speaking to the audience. Something that and that in itself is hard, right? VC is a hard job. Like, okay, if you're good at it, right, you make a killing. That's great.
Yeah.
But it's a hard job. I mean, I like to think about it like, think if you're, one of these VCs like Andreessen Horowitz, right? Like a newish big firm in the Bay Area. What if you had $2 billion in your pocket and the only way that you could generate a return for investors was to find 10, 20, $30 million at a time that you could put that into the riskiest companies in the world? That's daunting.
Yeah. Right.
And that's no small feat. And so having a little bit of empathy for just what that is like and I'd also say that in our ecosystem here in Utah, man, we have some great investors.
Oh, tremendous.
So, yeah. I mean, we don't have very many big investors, but our small investors, which is kind of the heartbeat of where I'm operating, those are the companies that I'm working with. Like there is a ton of empathy. It's still a job of saying no most of the time.
Yeah.
But there's a ton of empathy for the plight of founders. There's a ton of sort of humanity in that group, and some really, really smart people. Yeah. So it's a great place to be doing that. Like I would much rather be raising money at that stage here, than I would in almost any place else.
Yeah, it is such a small network, and all of those people who are involved in that world here are are really, really great human beings. Well, most of them.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah. Okay, so give us some marketing tips.
So definitely it's a customer first world.
Okay.
Right. So, and this is where I think it's the hard work that, almost at any stage, but the hard work is understanding the customer.
Okay.
you got to be talking to the customer. It's real easy to pass that job off to customer success or sales and say it's like, well, those guys are actually on the front lines, and they are.
Yeah.
And your sales team will probably talk to customers more than you do.
Right.
Or maybe even your product team, but you should always be doing some.
Okay.
I would say one other thing is that diagnosing marketing problems. This is the framework that I use for diagnosing marketing problems. I think has helped me a lot, and that is these 4 things. If you have these right, marketing works 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And that is the right customer, the right product, the right message, and the right channel.
Okay.
You can diagnose almost any friction, any problem you have in your marketing by looking at those. Sometimes if the product is a dog, not a marketing problem, and really hard to try to solve that with marketing. And that's an awareness for both the marketing team and for the founder. It's like, hey, look, nobody wants what I'm selling. I need to make a different thing, or I need to change it somehow. I need to solve a different problem. I think viewing marketing is essentially matchmaking between products and customers, helps make sense of it. I like too the relationship with marketing and sales. Like if you have friction with your sales team, like you marketing doesn't sell anything.
Right.
So you need to figure that out. And a big part of that is understanding the roles, right? I like the metaphor of the sales team as kind of like the Navy SEALs.
Yeah.
And so who's the marketing team? We're like the guys in the van with the satellite uplink.
Right.
Like,
right.
Okay, the customer's
Sneakers.
over here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's helpful.
Okay. Interesting.
So,
all right. Well, last question. Give us some places to eat or drink or get a cup of coffee here in Utah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to lean a little bit on the dessert side.
Oh, I love it. I mean,
right?
you do live in Utah County, so this is perfect.
The desserts are our vices,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So first off, if you haven't ever had a Cruffin at Beaumont, just off 215,
I love Beaumont Bakery. What a great.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. If this may be a little bit of a sleeper, but the creme brulee oatmeal at Gourmandy's, if you haven't had that for breakfast, like you haven't lived.
I used to live 20 yards away from Gourmandy's, and I hated it. But I've come to love what they're doing nowadays. It's been great. Yeah.
Yeah. They just opened one in Utah County down in American
They did.
Fork.
Oh, amazing. Their growth over the last, 10 years has been really exciting. They've turned around kind of their customer service and their food, and it really turned into being something more than what they were. And I'm not really sure why, but they've really turned into a real great business here in the state. Yeah.
I think the last one is so I live in Pleasant Grove. If you haven't been to Alicia's Cupcakes,
Alicia's Cupcakes.
So Alicia's Cupcakes is downtown Pleasant Grove.
Okay.
Which downtown Pleasant Grove is like this big, right?
Yeah.
And it's on Main Street, and they're like, these guys like, they won Cupcake Wars. Like, have you ever seen? Anyway,
I've never seen that, but
so it's called Cravings Alicia's Cupcakes.
Okay.
It's great. They actually there's a Cravings Bistro. It's right around the corner, which is also great. If you like,
same ownership.
I think they're sisters.
Okay.
But Alicia, if that's wrong, forgive me. But
okay, so the cupcakes at Alicia's Cupcakes. What's the go-to cupcake? Do they have a rotating menu, or is it like
they have a seasonal menu?
Okay.
But it is really tough to go wrong there. So they have. My wife's a huge fan of their pumpkin chocolate chip, which is seasonal. They only have that in the fall.
Okay.
So it's kind of maybe
as it should
time.
be. Yeah.
But I don't know. I like peanut butter, so I like that. Like they have a Reese's cupcake that's pretty amazing.
Man.
It's got and also I'm as much as I'm plugging them, I'm actually trying not to go so much because
it's a new year.
Trying for there to be less of me
coming
into 2024. But you kind of can't go wrong. They've got a great assortment.
I've been wondering when Utah's going to turn into a cupcake town instead of a cookie place, but I don't know that it's going to happen. But I've been looking for a good cupcake place, so I'm going to check it out.
They're great. They're great, and if you need an excuse, right? They make great company gifts, and bring them into the office in the morning.
All right,
that's a good choice.
I'm on board. Okay, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Pete.
All right, bye-bye. Thank you for joining us today on this episode of By Subject Podcast. If you have any guest recommendations or other comments, you can send them to us at info@bysubjectpodcast.com. By Subject Podcast is a production of Modern 8, an agency in partnership with Silicon Slopes and Mountain West Capital Network. Audio production by Dave Meekum. video production by Connor Mitchell, and the music by the insanely talented Josh Johnston. If you need any place to eat, or if you need any of our old interviews, you can find that all on our website at bysubjectpodcast.com.